We do have some questions. I will kind of like moderate a few of the ones that came into the chat. The first, and like Nathan and Matt, maybe both of you can unmute yourself and we can make this more of a conversation. The first question people have is, what does T stand for in TBTC?
Yeah, so that's part of the joke. There are a couple choices here. TBTC. Some people think that testnet assets should have acronyms, and I strongly disagree with that. So there's a small subset of Bitcoin engineers who will say testnet BTC should be TBTC. So that was one, is like, that name is bad and we're going to take it. It was a bit of shot across the bow. And then the other is, we've talked about trustless, threshold, tokenized. But yeah, it's, if I could have a winky face every time we wrote TBTC, I would.
Nice. Yes, I think all of those suggestions came up in the channel.
Troll BTC. There you go.
Even better. Okay, let me see in the chat if anybody had any questions. And Nathan, feel free to jump in. I know Matt did like a call to action for people's feedback. And one of the last questions Matt ended on was like, if you could bring DeFi to Zcash, how would that change the adoption horizons that you talked about at the beginning? And is that exciting? Is that like too much to wrap our heads around? What effect does that have on the ecosystem?
Yeah, if you're asking me, I think that potential is extremely exciting. I think technically it's fairly plausible. And so that could be in the cards in the future. I have one concern though about the difference or the relationship between the asset ZEC and the technology platform. And I mean, it's a similar question with Ethereum, ETH and the Ethereum platform. Could it be the case? I mean, people who love ETH believe maybe that platform brings value to ETH, the asset. But there's a counter argument that maybe the value would be captured by these other tokens on Ethereum, and over time the value of ETH would go down. And the problem with that is, if that's where staking or mining occurs, then suddenly the security of the whole network could be threatened.
Yeah.
And for me, it's really, so I think that ZEC itself, the asset, is a really important sort of driver for our mission. It's how we get stuff done. It's sort of our fuel, our rocket fuel to pull the network forward. So as long as we can make sure we are like protecting the value of ZEC correctly, and like getting it plugged in well into whatever ecosystem that might be, whatever marketplace that looks like, then I could be very supportive of it.
Yeah, so I actually want to maybe like double or triple down on that. I think that coming from Bitcoin land, I've spoken a little bit about this top heaviness idea. Nathan and I have kicked it around on Twitter. And ultimately, there's this opportunity for assets to piggyback on the security of the chain underlying without really giving back to the security relative to the size of the value that they're getting out of it, right? So there's this free rider problem that goes on. And we saw it with like Omni and all of those layers on top of Bitcoin. And in my opinion, we're seeing it now in Ethereum. If you look at all of the tether that's been printed, it's moving around on Ethereum, it's paying, pennies on the dollar to move that money around, and it's not really contributing the value that it should to the underlying security. So what I like about this opportunity for Zcash is we aren't starting with this full, almost Turing complete environment. So we can actually do this in such a way that value properly accrues to Zeke through utility, rather than Ethereum, who's got to kind of do these triple backflips to eventually change their economics. So I think, if anything, I just want to double down. People who say, oh, it's just about privacy, it's just about the technology, that's great. But you know, anyone who's done privacy work before cryptocurrencies will tell you it's not well funded. It's very passionate people who have no money. And it would be nice if, you know, no one needs to be fabulously wealthy to work on the thing they're passionate about, but it would be nice if we could just bring talent in that's fairly well compensated for this really critical work. Sometimes it's protecting people's lives against various regimes, and it's not something that should be done on a shoestring budget. So so I strongly agree. And just like high level, I do actually have actually from some ideas Nathan's aired before, and then some others I've been kicking around. I think I have a plan to even get the value to accrue if we do have user-defined assets, but that's like so many hops from now. So yeah, I'll kick that can unless someone really cares to hear more.
Well, they can always hear more in the forum. I know you're active on there. We have about 5 minutes left. If people are putting thoughts in the chat, I, for some reason, can't see them. But I do have a question kind of for both of you. Matt, you were just talking about funding, and that got my wheels turning about the next network upgrade, which hasn't been codenamed yet. We're gonna do that soon. But I know you were very thoughtful, a thoughtful contributor during the Dev Fund discussion. So could you share some of your thoughts on, you know, looking forward to that major grants committee or major grants fund?
Sure.
How do you think that'll influence development on Zcash?
Sure. So, you know, I was pretty loud during that discussion. I came in as a potential recipient of the Major Grants Committee. I'd love to be able to devote more of our time to Zcash core development, as well as marketing and kind of, you know, whatever really the community needs. So I think some signs that I've gotten since we had that discussion, multiple ecosystems have reached out, and I'm sure you guys have even heard it more than I have, but have reached out to try to emulate what was accomplished in the governance discussion. And I've had multiple chains talk to me about, well, you know, maybe you guys can come work over here and we'll hack in this fee here. And I'm like, well, you know, Zcash isn't hacking it in. They're doing it with broad community consensus. Like it's not. So I think I'm quite excited. I think that it's going to bring forward a lot of talent. I mean, I'm also scared because like I want to be the one, you know, and I think that's the nice thing about this tension between working on a passion project and having a business is if we're competing, you know, I hope there's going to be a better outcome for users.
Can I jump in with a few things? So
Yes, please.
yeah, one was, so I'm very excited about major grants. I saw a question about the status of ZIP 1014. Will it be complete by the end of the year? I don't know a lot of specific details about the status, but I do know that it will be completed by the end of the year. Like it's, that is basically set in stone that we're going to be launching that. Like the technical side is already sorted out. And so what remains to be done is like establish the corporate structure and then have the voting on the board seats. So that's sort of my high level recap of the status. But I also wanted to point out that there's not only will that be able to potentially bring in larger organizations who have larger budgets and plans, but the Zcash Foundation will continue to be doing its grant system, which is much better for like individuals or small projects. So there's some variety there. And then somebody asked about Gitcoin, and ECC has been chatting with Kevin Owocki of Gitcoin, and we're interested in experimenting with Gitcoin grant style funding, which would be yet a third sort of approach to funding. So I'm super excited to have these different funding avenues all being tried in parallel to see what sticks, and also to see how that can engage different kinds of contributors. So I'm very excited about all of this.
So I paused sharing my screen and I see people have been very active on the chat. That's awesome. And it seems like you guys have covered most of the questions. It looks like There was one question, how has the NU process changed since sapling? Is there still a network upgrade pipeline? This question would be for Nathan. And then I'll say, kind of miraculously, it looks like we're going to be on time and well within the hour for this call. So thank you both, Nathan and Matt, if I don't get a chance to say thank you before the call ends, for taking the time today to talk us through this stuff.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for having me.
The question about upgrades, that was a good question. I wonder who asked it.
It was James Joseph.
Yeah, so the history there is for overwinter and sapling, ECC just kind of figured out how to do the upgrades and did them. For Blossom, so starting after sapling, we wanted to engage more stakeholders and sort of codify the upgrade process so that outsiders could show up, propose zips, and advocate for them and get their own changes into the Zcash protocol. So we ran along with that, what was called the Zcash upgrade, the network upgrade pipeline plan for these two upgrades. So for Blossom and Heartwood. Blossom has activated, so that was the first one that went fully through that cycle, and Heartwood is on its way out the door. But I don't think we've achieved the goal that I set out with to make that process open and engaging for others to plug into. So we have been able to coordinate with the foundation just one-on-one, but it has kind of devolved back to just the foundation and us figuring out how to make decisions at the right time and doing it. So it's hard for outsiders to get involved. And so the new approach that I am focusing on is to ramp up just open source engagement with any contributors and have frequent lines of communication with anyone can show up. And I see that as a necessary next step before we can get people really connected to protocol development. And so the next step I'm taking there is setting up what's called the Zcash Gardening Club. And that's just basically a status sync-in where any Zcash open source project at all can show up, give a status update, and ask for help. And ECC will be showing up there to talk about upcoming needs for protocol development. And we're hoping that we can engage with people and have an open door and a way for them to ease into it. Whereas the previous approach was a very top-down, here's the schedule, there's these deadlines and deliverables, and it's really hard for an outsider to suddenly plug into a really thick bureaucracy. So we're trying a different approach now.
Nice. Okay. Well, so you heard it here first, or you heard it here not first. You heard it here second. There's the Zcash Gardening Club. That's May 5th. Zcash Zeal Community calls always happen the last Tuesday of every month. Thank you everybody for participating in the chat and for being so active. Thanks again, Matt and Nathan. These recordings will be on our YouTube channel by the end of the week. And we don't have a topic yet set for May's Zeal Call. So if you have suggestions, please let me know. And then other than that, I wish you all a wonderful week and see you on the internet.
Stay healthy, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.